After initiating the Einstein Prediction Builder in the sandbox, remember we were on this page, which is the Prediction Builder program completion page, and basically telling you to go to setup to figure it all out. But there's really helpful content here to make sure you work through. You can get to it lots of other ways, but that's a good start, and especially learning how to enable your predictions. So let's go back to it, and what you'll see here. This is our workforce development. Now, I also ended up building a second one as a test. And what you'll see is that once you've tried to run one and test it, you can enable it, edit, clone, delete. But if we're trying to actually do the scorecard, you have to disable and then re-enable. And then you actually get the chance to view the scorecard. So let's do that, because I think this scorecard is important to understand just a bit about it. First thing is, its quality of our prediction is great, and I'll show you that's a challenge for lots of reasons. But what you're seeing is the predicted yeses, correctly predicted 89% of the time, and the no's predicted 90% of the time. If we look at the top predictors, and I'm going to go down to this, and if we click here on View All Predictors, what we're seeing is there's a performance 4 that was strong. And what that meant was, if we float here, that the predicted outcome is more likely to be no when performance is a 4. So you say, all right, what does that mean? And so if we actually then go out to, this is the active contacts. And so what we did was to say, these are folks who are active in the program as opposed to having withdrawn or completed. So these are the folks that we're trying to predict. And so what we did was to create a likelihood to compete prediction. And then that second one I did was a likelihood version 3. And same exact data set, same exact model, but interesting that it came back with different scores. And what I did was a comparison of the difference of these, right? So 1 minus 2 is a -1, 7 minus 11 is a -4, and was looking at how did they differ. And so you can see we're sorted by this first likelihood. There's 94 items, and what we're able to look at is kind of plus or minus, kind of where would they have been. So it seems like we can get in kind of that 10 range to know that when we run the model, we're going to potentially see slightly different information. If we get down to the 90s, the yeses were enabled. So let me show you actually the background of how we actually pulled all this together. So here is the underlying code that I used to create the fake data, and this is using Snowfakery. And I'll show you the links of how to actually do this. It's relatively straightforward, and luckily it's sanctioned by Salesforce, so it's worth figuring out how to do it. But what we were doing was building contact records, and you can see this one is the withdrawn, and if we drop down to it, you'll see a code here that's workforce development status is equal to withdrew. So that was what we were doing. But if we look at let's see which one, we're looking for performance 4, and so if we look here and we say, okay, workforce, here's performance. And so if we look at withdraw 4 was a 2, and withdraw when they completed, look to it, and you can see I'm scrolling through the code over here, and so performance withdraw 4 was a 0. So we're saying there were no completes that we coded with this score. What we scored them was a distribution like this. So the 1s got 1 and 5s and 3s. These don't have to be actually, they'll do an average based on the numbers you use. You don't have to make the average, we'll add them up to 10. It's a real smart little program. So what we're seeing here is that completes, there were no 4s. Withdraws, there were at least 2 for performance. And so when we go back out and look at it, that's what they're saying is that there's more likely to be a no when you've got a 4 because there were no completes with 4s. And so what they're doing here is they're actually looking at at kind of what's the strength of these indicators and how best to use them. Now, what got a little bit confusing for me, and the reason I ran it a couple times, was that when I went out and looked at one of the initial contacts that I built, and again, this is one of the faked contacts, but you can see, look, it's got great fake data. It's got emails and work addresses and multiple phone numbers, attendance. I had it as one as unsatisfactory, and that's the way it's actually coded in the assessment. But the way that I actually built this was actually strong, so you can see a withdraw was 0, but when I completed on compliance, it was a 1. So it was my mistake, but what it shows again is that when you code this thing out, this is you can make whatever distribution you want to when you're using fake data. But it all worked, and more importantly is when we go out to it and we look at it, what they're saying here is when we close this, that it's actually blew all the way out, but they said it was a strong prediction. So that was the interesting part there. So anyway, so that's the VS Code. I'll show the link to that, and you can see again, looking at recently viewed contacts, the Snowfakery creates really pretty rich data, emails and phone numbers, a little bit wonky looking at home phone numbers that look international for Idaho. The only other thing I thought that was interesting to make sure that you saw here was that when I looked at this home piece, it says when you want to upgrade, so we're using, again, this try version, but if you go out and look at the upgrade, what it does say is there are some things that you can do. Especially interesting to me was getting this show top predictors on your record, which can actually show for any given contact what you're trying to do. Because remember, the objective of this was be able to say, if we're looking at the likelihood that someone is going to finish, and again, you can go to either direction, this is just basically saying that this group here would be ones that we really want to pay attention to, and that's based on the scores that they got. And so it's a great way of being able to come up with a way to make sure that your team is focused, whether it's on people or whether it's on accounts or whether it's on deals, whatever it is. This is a way to be able to create a very objective metric of where to focus. Hope that's a helpful introduction, and good luck with your Einstein Prediction Builder. Thanks. And also Snowfakery. Give it a try.